Five Nights at Freddy's has always been a polarizing title. From the people saying the game should have ended in its first 3 to 4 entries, to people saying that the game has become over brand friendly by removing a lot of the horror elements from the titles in favor of more child-friendly games like FNAF Security Breach. However, by far the most polarizing side of FNAF in recent times has actually been the fan games. More specifically, the Fazbear Fanverse Initiative, which if you didn't know was a program Scott created to help fund different fan games like One Night at Flumpty's and Pop Goes Evergreen. But right out of the gate, these fan games became drowned in controversy. Most notably, the One Night at Flumpty's developer being exposed for relations with somebody underage, along with the FNAF Plus developer Fiznom claiming he was no longer a fan of the Five Nights at Freddy's series at all. These controversies began to raise eyebrows for the community, especially since all these fan game developers were a part of this fanverse community, so people at this point were beginning to question the validity of the fanverse initiative as a whole. The first larger YouTuber to bring up these controversies would of course be the YouTuber by the name Theft King. 3 months ago, Theft King dropped a video called Will Scott Cancel the Fanverse? And in this video, he highlighted a few of these previously mentioned controversies, and the reception of this video was actually incredibly positive, getting cosigns from some of the biggest creators in the fanverse like Kane Carter, who was working on the Pop Goes fan games, where he said, "You did a great job with this. If you're interested, I'm open to give a bit more info or have a chat about the fanverse and the development of these fan games." So that was pretty much that, and the next big thing to really happen in regards to fan games would be the exposing of a massive group named The Pair, who was behind the scenes using their connections to try and get leaks for these different fan games like Pop Goes Evergreen. This controversy, while definitely horrible, would actually surprisingly end up being a net positive for the community. The same YouTuber Theft King would release his own explanation of the entire thing, and while this huge fan game leak was terrible, it ended up bringing a lot of the community together, making the group of leakers sort of like a common enemy that the entire community could agree that they did not like. So from this point forward, it honestly seemed like everything was gonna be okay. But of course, that leads up to this most recent controversy when things got bad. And this is actually when I would come in, because a few days ago, I would release a video under the title, Why the Fazbear Fanverse Initiative Failed. And it highlighted a lot of the similar points mentioned previously from One Night at Flumpty's, all the way to the most recent fanverse-related game named Pop Goes Arcade by Kane Carter once again. Now, the main point I made in this video was the fact that Kane Carter sold this game as pretty unsuccessful in his own words, having little reach in the grand scheme of things despite it being quite the positively rated game in terms of critical ratings. However, upon this video's release, Kane Carter would see it and he would actually disagree with me. Kane would eventually head to Twitter to make a statement that sort of started all the controversy. 1. Pop Goes Arcade releases on Steam, 98% rating. 2. Funko and U2's merch out this year. 3. Nixon is allowed to work on the joy of creation again. 4. Fiznom with plenty of FNAF Plus dev updates. Every FNAF YouTuber in the world. The fanverse is a failure. Scott failed us. The initiative is doomed. So he was talking about my video, but clearly he was referencing the entire FNAF community. And also in this thread, he would go on to question the lack of positivity in the community as a whole in all areas. Now, if you're looking for a specific statement from me, you're not really going to find that much, because honestly, I didn't want to make this a bigger deal than it needed to be, since we're literally talking about one dude's opinion on Freddy Fazbear fan games. But I still tried to be respectful here. I wrote a little paragraph about it, changed the title of the video to not be as unnecessarily harsh because I felt like it was deserved, and that was it, right? Of course not. Because this question started to linger in people's minds more. The question of the state of the FNAF community and the toxic nature of it. And a big byproduct of this was people beginning to call out other YouTubers who they thought did similar things, most notably the YouTuber Theft King once again, for some of his other previous videos, including the once critically praised ones I just mentioned. Now, I'm not going to sit here and determine whether or not Theft King or even I'm responsible for this negativity, because on one hand, we are probably both guilty of being too harsh on the game at some points, but also on the other, some of our biggest videos are overwhelmingly positive towards the fanverse. Anyway, regardless, the community came in uproar on Twitter and everyone was immediately talking about it. We saw YouTubers like FNAF bringing it up, Johnny Blocks, Fiznom, every small and big Five Nights at Freddy's account was talking about it, including Theft King himself, which might I add started to make things a lot worse because Theft King was replying to a lot of these people, starting a Twitter rampage back and forth with the community and himself, sort of discussing the morals of making these types of videos. And as Theft would get more and more hate, he would actually make a full-blown video discussing the controversy at least a little bit. The video for the most part was just a highlight reel of Theft showing off that he had been positive in a lot of his videos about the fanverse. But the most important part is at the end when he makes a statement towards Kane Carter, the person who made the original tweet, saying, "Kane, there will be times times in the future where regrettable events occur. I will sometimes cover these events, that's my job. Theft King also highlighted that Kane Carter was never really responding to his DMs on Twitter, and it seemed like the same guy who praised his initial video on the fanverse now wanted nothing to do with him. But it's also worth noting as a side note that Kane Carter would release Theft King's DMs with him, and apparently they did end up talking just on other platforms. I don't really understand that. Anyway, after this video, Kane would actually respond to this controversy, but not in the way that you would expect. He would state that he was making an apology video for his actions, to which he linked said apology. And it was a rickroll. Okay, admittedly, that got me. And it was kind of funny, but it began to spark even more divide in the community. On one side, people were still upset with Theft King for the reasons previously stated, but on the other side, people took this response video as immature from Kane. And instead of responding, Kane wasn't really taking theft seriously at all. And this is while another fan game developer named FNAF retweeted this among other Twitter accounts who were memeing on him, basically causing even more of a war. Like, at this point, FNAF was literally trending along with other words like Pop Ghost. But honestly, while this seems to be the peak of it, things from this point forward would start to get pretty sad. Theft King was facing all this constant backlash, so in response, he would go live to apparently get his mind off things. But while that was the original point of the live, a couple minutes in, Theft King already began to rant to major extremes about the controversy. Out of respect for Theft King, I won't show you this video because it does get quite serious. But while live streaming, eventually Kane Carter himself would actually send a donation trolling Theft King in the stream, encouraging him to look at some troll tweets he made previously, which in the end caused Theft to get pushed over the edge, and he ended the stream entirely. This didn't fix the problem at all, and it actually made things a lot worse for both of them. Theft King kept giving all this hate so much attention, and he was allowing them to win. It eventually reached the point where people like FNAF would even end up entirely blocking him, despite them literally collaborating for videos just a couple weeks prior. Eventually, this fan game controversy was evolving to a criticism of the YouTuber Theft King specifically, even ending with him entirely trending on Twitter. And it quickly spread from a problem with the FNAF community as a whole to discussing Theft King and his ability to take said criticisms. Unfortunately, there's no happy ending to this drama thus far, because Theft King would end up streaming again, ranting more and more about it, and then ending the stream off by saying that Kane Carter was going to burn in hell. He has fortunately since apologized for this, but it was still bad. So anyway, what are my thoughts on this as a whole? Because if we're being honest, I was kind of the one who accidentally started it all the way from the very beginning, and all I have to say is this. What Kane Carter said here was genuinely not that harmful realistically. He saw my video and he had something to say about it. I don't have a problem with that. However, clearly it spiraled all the way out of control, and honestly, I'm worried about the community now. We just saw what happens when there's this much toxicity around a community, and what's worse is that while this was definitely one of the worst cases of the controversy, this is not a new thing. Even Theft King himself had been through many controversies, just like how Kane Carter has, and the entire FNAF community as a whole. And while I don't believe Kane Carter nor Theft King made the right moves here at all, they are still both huge names in this community, and they honestly made it entirely look bad. I do genuinely feel terrible that all this was caused by one of my random videos, but was it really the video itself that made all this a big deal, or the reaction of the community? The people constantly memeing Theft King, calling him out, pinging him on Twitter, and Theft King himself falling victim to these trolls and giving them all the attention that they wanted, while also taking a lot of the valid criticism as personal attacks. Nobody was in the right here, man. And as much as Kane Carter combats this by posting other people's videos that focus on the more positive sides, or Theft King streams with the goal of debunking all these claims, at the end of the day that all this controversy stops is when we stop the divide in the community that has been going on for years. Ever since people were hating on Scott for making more than 3 FNAF games, all the way up to the controversial security breach launch, and now these fan games. People are just way too divided for this community to stay healthy. And while I'm hoping to maybe find some middle ground here that everyone can agree on with this video, there's a real problem with the FNAF community, and it doesn't end with people barking at each other back and forth on Twitter, but rather being able to literally just get along. I hope for the best for the FNAF community, but while there's definitely a lot of problems with it, maybe we could start finding some middle ground now and all agree that we all need to stay off Twitter.